The veil is still warm when they find her. It clings to her skin like breath, damp, thin, trembling at the edges. Her eyes are open, her mouth too. But she doesn't speak. She never will. By morning the silk bedsheets are stained, not with blood, not always, but with something worse. Silence. The kind that presses against the walls of the palace thick as fog. The kind that everyone understands but no one dares name. It was supposed to be a wedding night. There had been candles, musicians, a procession of nobles and clerics, all bowing as the young bride passed. She smiled because she thought she was supposed to, because no one told her what came next. Not really. They never say it out loud. Not to her, not to anyone, because saying it would make it real. But the servants know. They whisper behind tapestries, their hands trembling as they fold yet another bridal gown into burial cloth. The guards know too. They stand just outside the royal bedchamber, silent, still, hearing the creak of the bed frame, the single muffled scream, if there is one, and then nothing. And the king? He emerges at dawn, untouched, always alone, always calm. He walks past the body as if it were just another pair of slippers, as if the corpse of his queen were nothing more than a wrinkle in the carpet. This is not the first time, nor the second, nor even the fifth. It has happened so often that the palace priests no longer ask questions. They bless the corpse, they recite the rites, they say God has taken her early. How merciful. But the people outside the palace walls are not fools. They've stopped cheering when a new bride is chosen. They've stopped lining the streets to throw flowers. Now they cover their daughters' faces. They say prayers not for the wedding but for the night, because that's all she'll have. One night, one bed, one final breath under royal sheets. The royal court calls it tradition, a tragic pattern, a string of unfortunate deaths. But the midwives know better. They see the bruises, the fingers snapped from resistance, the faint red line around the neck that someone tries to hide with powder. They see it all, and they say nothing, because no one who speaks of it survives either. You are the next bride. You know it before they say your name, before the messenger kneels in your father's hall, before the letter is opened, the seal broken, and your fate sealed with a ring. You don't scream, you don't run, because that would dishonour your family. Instead, you walk, you let them fit you into the white gown, you let them fasten the necklace, you let them twist your hair into a crown you did not earn. At the altar, the king does not smile, he simply nods. The vows are short, the kiss is brief, and by nightfall you are led through corridors that smell of wax and iron and old perfume. You're told the king is waiting, that he is kind, that he is misunderstood. You step into the chamber, the door closes behind you. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Before the king was a monster, he was a boy. And before he learned to kill women with silence, he learned to survive men with power. His childhood did not begin in a nursery. It began in a courtroom, a high vaulted chamber where voices echoed louder than lullabies, and the only thing softer than the velvet throne was the accusation that followed it. He was 5 when he first saw blood stain the hem of a queen's dress. Not just any queen, his mother. Dragged from the throne she once ruled beside his father. Charged with adultery, treason, heresy. Each word was like a stone thrown at her chest, until even the servants looked away. She knelt in the courtyard, hands bound in front of her. She didn't weep. She kissed his forehead as they took her, and when they lifted the sword, he did not scream. He watched. His nursemaid said he didn't cry for 3 days after. Not when he was hungry, not when he was alone, not when he saw his mother's ring handed to a woman who called herself queen the very next week. He was taught early. Women could not be trusted. They lied with smiles. They seduced kings and betrayed crowns. That's what they said. And he believed them. because it was easier than believing that love could be ripped from your hands like fabric, that family could become executed, that a mother's kiss could be the last thing you remembered before learning what steel smells like. His father remarried quickly, too quickly. The new queen painted her lips. She spoke in riddles. She called him my prince, but locked her door at night. She didn't beat him. She didn't love him either. She fed him sweet cakes and let him see the world through a window, never through a door. When she died in childbirth, they said it was a mercy. But he remembered the way she looked at him as the pain overtook her, not as a boy, as a threat. And that look stayed. As he grew, every woman in court became a variation of her, beautiful, mysterious, dangerous. His tutors trained him in politics, in scripture, in history. But what stayed with him most was what one old advisor whispered late one night. A king who forgets how quickly a woman can betray him won't live long enough to wear his crown twice. He never forgot. He became king at 15. The court wept with joy. Nobles pledged loyalty. The church declared it divine will. But behind the celebrations, the whispers never stopped. He is too young, too cold, too quiet. And when they pressured him to marry, to secure the line, to strengthen the crown, to bring peace, he agreed, but not to bring life into the world, to bring order. He chose his first queen not for beauty or bloodline, but for obedience. And when she failed to offer it the way he demanded, he did not banish her. He did not forgive her. He executed her. There was no trial, no public announcement, just a silent procession at dawn. A white gown placed over a wooden box, a king who never blinked. The court gasped. The church flinched. But no one stopped him. And something inside him clicked. He had found the one power no one could question, the right to end what disappointed him. And so it began. Bride after bride, night after night, each one bearing the same hope, each one walking into the same fire. He was not born cruel, but he was taught that cruelty is safer than trust, that a woman spared might live long enough to turn on you, but a woman silenced, she never would. She was the first to wear the crown beside him, the first to sit at his table, the first to kiss his cheek in public and believe it meant something. She was not foolish. She was not naive. But she had been raised in a house where royal favour was everything, and she was told from childhood that love and duty could be the same thing if you performed them well enough. So she did. She practiced every curtsy. She memorised his lineage. She recited his victories like prayers and learned the silence of the palace corridors before she ever stepped foot inside. And when the day came, when the summons arrived and the veil was placed over her hair, she smiled, because she believed she had won something. He looked at her that first night the way kings are taught to look, cold, calm, unreadable, but she smiled anyway. She poured his wine, she spoke softly, she thanked him for the honour. He did not reply, not with words, but he watched her, through dinner, through the walk to the chamber, through the endless stillness that followed. He never struck her, not that night. He undressed her with the same precision he gave to swordplay. No warmth, no cruelty either, just calculation. As if she were a scroll to be read, a lock to be picked, a puzzle to be solved. She did everything they told her to. She laid still. She whispered gratitude. She held her breath when his hands paused on her throat, not with fear, but with faith, because she believed he would not harm what had been given to him in sacred vow. In the morning she was cold. There were no signs of struggle, no bruises large enough to explain, just the stillness of a woman who had gone to bed in trust and woken up as a warning. The palace servants found her first. They told the guards told the chaplain told no one, because the king had already given the order. Burial by sunset, no mourning rites. That was all he said. No inquiry, no comfort, no explanation. The palace held its breath for a day, but then a new announcement came. Another marriage, another bride already chosen, another celebration planned, one no one dared question. They burned her linens, they removed her portrait, they repainted the walls of her chamber, and in the royal records her name was written only once, next to the date of her wedding and the date of her death, the same. Some whispered that she had died of illness, that she had been cursed, that her spirit had rejected the crown. But those who dressed her corpse knew better. They saw the skin still warm, the hand clenched, not relaxed, the faint blue line that wrapped around the neck, just below the jaw, where a lover's fingers might rest if he wished to quiet you forever. She had not died from fear. She had died from faith. Faith that if she obeyed, if she loved enough, served enough, bent enough, he would let her live. He didn't, because he never intended to, because in his mind she was never meant to last. Only to confirm what he already believed, that no woman could be trusted for longer than one night. The palace was never quiet, even when no one spoke, even when the halls emptied, even when laughter vanished like breath in winter. It was never quiet, because the walls remembered, because each stone bore witness, because somewhere behind the tapestries there was always another dress being folded for burial, another bride waiting. They still celebrated the weddings, each one more lavish than the last. The priests came, the nobles raised their goblets, the minstrels played while the bride walked the aisle, her hands trembling in silk gloves. She smiled, as all the others had. But by then the court had stopped believing the smiles meant anything. They had become part of the ritual, like incense, like the embroidered altar cloth, like the grave that was already being dug in the garden behind the chapel. Some queens died quietly, some screamed, some were found with their throats opened, others simply stopped breathing, their skin still flushed from the wine. No cause of death was ever listed, just the same phrase copied over and over in the court ledger, taken too soon. But it soon became the pattern. One night, one death, one new queen. No one questioned it. Not the bishops, not the royal advisors, not the ambassadors who still sent their daughters in exchange for treaties that would be dead by morning. Because questioning meant defiance, and defiance meant punishment, and punishment, when delivered by this king, never ended with words. So they all played along. The palace tailors kept making bridal gowns, the court poets kept writing odes, the painters kept brushing new faces onto canvas, only to scrape them clean weeks later. And behind the throne, a row of sealed boxes began to grow. They weren't coffins, at least not officially. They were memorial reliquaries, locked crates of silks and perfumes and jewellery, items that once belonged to queens who now belonged to no one. They sat in the dark, collecting dust, just like the memories of the women themselves. Because grief was not allowed. To mourn too loudly was to invite suspicion. To speak of the queens after they were gone was to risk becoming them. To cry was to confess that you had loved someone the king had judged unworthy to live. So the women in court became shadows. They lowered their eyes. They made their footsteps soft. They learned the art of not being noticed. Even the queen's ladies in waiting were rotated weekly, not for safety, for containment, so that none of them would grow too attached to the bride, so that no one would notice when she didn't come back from her wedding night. One day, a seamstress slipped a ribbon into her pocket, a keepsake from a queen who had once shared her bread. By sunrise, she was gone. No explanation, no trial, just gone. The message was clear. Even memory was a crime, and still they came. Daughters of dukes, sisters of emperors, chosen for their diplomacy, their purity, their silence. All of them walked the same path. All of them passed the same chapel. All of them disappeared behind the same door. It wasn't a kingdom, not really. It was a graveyard stitched to a throne, and the only thing growing in it was fearful. They called it a wedding bed, But no one slept there. Not really, not the queens, not the king, not anyone who understood what the bed truly was. It was not a place of love, or warmth, or trust. It was a test, a battlefield dressed in linen, a throne turned horizontal, where obedience was measured not in hours but in silence. The king didn't speak when he entered. He never did. He sat at the edge. He watched. And she, whoever she was that night, sat up straighter, smiled harder, remembered everything her mother ever told her about how to survive a man's hands. Some were bold. They tried to charm him. They laughed. They reached for him. Others chose fear. They bowed their heads. They apologized before anything had begun. Both were wrong, because the game had no rules, and the king had no type. What pleased him one night repulsed him the next. What earned a breath of mercy for one bride earned a whisper of death for another. He wasn't looking for love. He wasn't even looking for loyalty. He was looking for confirmation, proof that women could not be trusted. That power in the hands of a queen would always threaten the king, and the bed was where he made his case. One by one they were stripped, not just of their clothes, but of their lineage, their languages, their identities. A princess of the north became just another body. A duchess from the east became nothing more than breath and skin. They thought their crowns might protect them. They didn't, because the moment they laid down beside him, their bloodlines meant nothing. Their titles dissolved, their nations vanished. All that remained was the question, would she survive the night? The bed asked it over and over, with every kiss that lingered too long, with every pause that held too much weight, with every hand that wandered not with lust, but with calculation. The king measured them, not in beauty, but in submission, in how quickly they bent, how softly they begged, how completely they gave up the idea of being anything but his. And when they didn't, when a bride dared to hold his gaze or speak when not prompted or flinch when he approached, the decision was made, not in anger, never in rage. The king was always calm. He would lie back, close his eyes, and let the silence fill the room like smoke. Then, at dawn, he would rise, dress, step over the body, and give the same command: burn the sheets. Because the bed was contaminated now, tainted by disobedience, by defiance, by a woman who forgot her place for a single moment. Even the mattress was changed, even the pillows discarded. The bed was sacred, and he would not let it remember anyone who failed his test. Those who cleaned it never spoke, not because they didn't want to, because they feared their words might be heard. Because even whispering a name, the name of a queen who died naked and wordless, could be considered treason. So they worked in silence. They folded the linens, they scrubbed the stains, they replaced the bedding, and they prepared it for the next bride, because there was always another one waiting. And the king, he was never tired. She wasn't supposed to last. She was a pawn, like the rest. A princess with the right lineage, the right silence, the right smile. Sent across mountains to marry a man no one dared defy, and no one truly understood. But something was different. From the moment she stepped inside the palace, people noticed. She didn't bow too deeply. She didn't flinch when the king's name was spoken. And when they fitted her for the bridal gown, she adjusted it herself, without waiting for permission. It wasn't arrogance. It was stillness, a quiet certainty. The servants exchanged glances. The seamstress crossed herself. The steward whispered that the new queen would not last past midnight. They all expected the same ending. The wedding was swift, the feast subdued. The king offered no toast, no dance, but when they were alone in the chamber, he spoke. Just one word. Sit. And she did. Not hurriedly, not meekly. She sat at the edge of the bed and looked at him, not through him, at him. And in that single moment the room shifted. He asked her where she was from. She told him. He asked if she was afraid. She said no. He asked if she knew what had happened to the others. She said yes, and still she had come, not because she wanted power, not because her father ordered it, but because she had decided to face him, not as prey, as equal. That night no screams echoed down the corridor, no servant was summoned, no doctor called. By morning the Queen was alive. The palace didn't know what to do. They waited for the announcement of her death. They waited for the procession. They waited for the familiar lie. But instead she appeared at breakfast, fully dressed, quiet, breathing. The courtiers watched her like a ghost. Some crossed themselves, others fled the hall entirely, but she remained. For 3 days, then 4. She walked the gardens, she read in the library, she even laughed once. And in those few moments the kingdom whispered, "Has he changed? Is she different? Will this queen be the first to reign?" But on the 7th day, she vanished. No funeral, no official statement. The king simply returned to court alone. He said nothing. He looked unchanged. But the next bride arrived within a fortnight, and when the handmaids went to prepare the queen's chamber, they found the gown, her wedding gown, burned, charred black, still smouldering in the hearth. No one spoke her name after that, not because they forgot it, but because they weren't allowed to remember. The king's scribes erased her from the records. Her family was paid to stay silent. Her portraits were destroyed. But among the servants, the story lived. They called her the one who almost lived, the woman who spoke to the king as though he were just a man, who lasted longer than a night, who looked at power and didn't look away. Some say she tried to run. Others say he fell in love with her, and that's what scared him most. Because love meant losing control. Love meant doubt. Love meant seeing her as more than a reflection of his fear. And the king could not allow that, not even once.
Él no lo ocultaba. Y eso es lo que hace la historia aún peor. El rey no se colaba en las cámaras con una daga. No enviaba asesinos ni copas envenenadas tras puertas cerradas. Él se casaba con ellas, públicamente, con testigos, anillos y bendiciones. Y al día siguiente estaban muertas. Todos lo sabían, pero nadie lo detenía. Ni los obispos que bendecían a cada novia, ni los consejeros que brindaban por cada unión, ni los padres nobles que ofrecían a sus hijas como sobornos políticos envueltos en satén. Porque detenerlo significaba decir la palabra en voz alta, asesinato. Y si decías eso, el palacio cambiaba la forma en que te miraba. No era una cuestión de pruebas. Había de sobra. El patrón, los moretones, los silencios repentinos. Pero la evidencia solo importa en un mundo donde la justicia vale más que el miedo. Este no era ese mundo. Este era su reino, y en su reino, el silencio era recompensado. Las preguntas, castigadas. Los que hablaban, desaparecen. Una dama de compañía preguntó una vez, ¿por qué no se llamó a un sacerdote para los últimos ritos de una reina? Desapareció antes del amanecer. Su familia recibió sus zapatos y nada más. Un cronista de la corte se atrevió a anotar las fechas de las muertes de las reinas en los márgenes de un pergamino. La tinta aún estaba fresca cuando lo sacaron de su cama y lo enterraron con el pergamino clavado al pecho. Así que dejaron de intentarlo. Cantaban las canciones de la boda, pintaban los retratos, llenaban los salones de banquetes con alegría forzada y vino cuidadosamente medido. Cada sonrisa se volvió una máscara, cada oración un escudo. Incluso el clero aprendió a adaptarse. Reescribieron los ritos para bendecir la partida de una novia en lugar de su futuro. Un sacerdote susurró una vez una bendición que terminaba con las palabras: y si vas a morir esta noche, que el cielo no pregunte por qué. El obispo lo escuchó. El obispo no lo repitió. porque incluso la iglesia se inclinaba ante un rey cuya corona descansaba sobre cadáveres. Algunos nobles lo justificaban. Decían que el rey estaba maldito, que su corazón había sido envenenado en la juventud, que estaba de luto, no asesinando. Decían que no sabía lo que hacía. Pero mentían. Él sabía exactamente lo que hacía. Porque si de verdad no lo supiera, ¿por qué las ejecuciones eran siempre de noche? ¿Por qué los médicos estaban siempre de guardia? ¿Por qué se ordenaban los sudarios antes que los vestidos de boda? Esto no era locura, esto era política. Una exhibición, una lección, una ley escrita en piel, no en pergaminos. Gobernaba no por decreto, sino por el miedo que se sentaba al final de cada mesa, junto a cada hija noble. Y el pueblo observaba, desde detrás de las puertas del palacio, desde los márgenes de la ciudad, desde las tabernas donde susurraban historias que siempre terminaban con la luz de una vela y un silencio repentino. Lloraban por las reinas, pero no se alzaban por ellas, porque alzarse significaba sangre, y ya habían visto suficiente sangre. Se convencieron de que era política, que había razones que no entendían, que tal vez las reinas lo habían traicionado, porque es más fácil creer que una mujer hizo algo mal que aceptar que un hombre así simplemente fue permitido. Así que contaban historias, que el rey estaba poseído, que había hecho un pacto con el diablo, que sus esposas eran brujas disfrazadas, cualquier cosa para explicar lo que nadie quería admitir, que él lo hacía, que ellos lo permitían, que el silencio nunca es neutral, protege al asesino, no a los muertos.
They never built a monument. Not for the queens, not for the daughters who crossed kingdoms to marry death, not for the women who stepped into the palace wearing silk and left it under soil. There is no statue, no plaque, no scripture, just a garden, walled off, always shaded, never spoken of. They called it the Queen's Orchard, but no fruit grows there, only roses, all red, all trimmed back before they bloom too wide. The grave markers are small, barely carved. Some are just stones. Some don't even have names, because names are dangerous. They remind people who was lost. They remind people who took them. The servants know the count, even if the court won't say it aloud. 13 queens, 13 knights, 13 pairs of hands folded beneath the earth, and one king, still alive, still worshipped, still clean. They say he walks the garden once a year, not to mourn, not to pray, to inspect, to see that the flowers stay in line, to see that no one leaves tokens, to see that no ghosts rise up from the soil and ask questions. Because if they did, what would he say? That he was lonely, that he needed obedience more than love, that he built his legacy on the backs of women he never tried to know. He would say nothing, just as he always has, because silence was not just a weapon, it was the throne itself and the graveyard of brides. That was the true kingdom, the one he built and the one they all served in the end.